Welcome, everybody, to AOPA's Flight School Business Quick Tips from the Field. Today, we are glad to be joined by Michael Hangartner, the Director of Professional Pilot Training down at Rexair Professional Pilot Academy in Sebring, Florida.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be here.
So, Michael, we're really glad to have you here today. And we do know that Rexair, the new location that you're in, is relatively new, a little over a year. But in doing that, I know that you've been working hard at bringing new students in. And obviously, it's really critical to maintain retention and to make sure that they're able to complete their training. Can you give us some insight into how you're doing that at Rexair?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we do want to do everything that we can to set our students up for success. One thing that is perhaps unique about our students is because we are a full-time accelerated pilot academy aimed specifically at students who want to become professional pilots. All of them are here to do the full training track. They all are going to go through the private certificate, their instrument rating, their commercial, and then they're going to become CFIs and get their multi. And so, as you would imagine, that's a fairly long progression to keep a student motivated the entire time. And so what we do is we really work hard, first off, to set up realistic expectations when the students come to us. We don't want them to have an unrealistic picture of the amount of time that their training is going to take or the amount that it's going to cost. So one of the important things is just being very honest in the beginning, helping to establish expectations for them, and not just expectations in terms of money and time, but also expectations when it comes to the emotional journey of flight training. Because as you know, it's not always easy. And so one of the things we do is we meet with our students very early on and explain to them some of the things that they're going to be able to expect during the training process, not just in terms of the different phases of training where you'll solo and then you'll move on to this part of the progression and then you'll do this check ride, but also what they can expect emotionally. So we talk about learning plateaus and the fact that there's likely going to come a point where you feel like you aren't making quite as much progress as you would like to be, or maybe you feel like you should be. We talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect and how initially, as you start learning any complex topic, and it's especially true in aviation, your confidence in the beginning is going to really shoot up and you're going to feel like you're doing great. You know everything. And then as you continue to learn more, you're very likely going to go through a phase where you start feeling like you know less and less, or you're doing less and less well. Now, eventually, of course, that trend reverses itself again. And as you truly become an expert in the field, you feel more and more confident. But we want students to be ready for those valleys so that they're expecting them and it's not a surprise along the way. Another thing that we do with all of our students very early on is I will sit down with them and ask them to write down what their why is, why they're there, why they want to do this flight training process. And I make sure that they don't just write down to be an airline pilot, because that's really not a why at all when you think about it. That's a what. It's really important for the student to reflect on what's driving them toward this goal, so that, again, if for whatever reason during their training process they start to feel a little frustrated, their motivation starts to dip a bit, they have something that they can look back on and remember why they're in this. And another important part of keeping students motivated, keeping them going through the process, is always taking the time to celebrate wins. Mm-hmm. And that's something we believe in very strongly at our school. Every time that a student hits a milestone, whether it's a first solo flight or they earn a new certificate, all the students at the academy will all drive down to the airport and greet them when they get back from the check ride. We'll have cake, some kind of celebration. Also, each time a student gets a new certificate at Rexair, or their initial certificate at least, we award them with a call sign that the instructors and other students have come up with, and we'll give them a personalized hat reflecting that. And so we make sure that the flight training experience is fun and that we're remembering to take the time to recognize the huge accomplishments that these students are making along the way. And then one other thing that I would say when it comes to retention especially is a student is more likely to stay in flight training and to stick out the process in its entirety if they are being successful and if they can see that
Mhm.
success. And so part of student retention is just making sure that students are set up very well for their check rides and that we send them
Mhm.
to a check ride, they're amply prepared. So prior to every check ride, we have a very extensive stage check that's become almost notorious among some of the students at the school, just in how comprehensive it is. So we'll sit down, we'll do a full blown oral with them. Usually it goes on a good bit longer than their actual oral will at the check ride. We'll do a full on flight. And we feel very strongly that if a student is able to get through one of our stage checks, that they are going to be able to succeed in a check ride. And
Mhm.
so far, our results have very much borne that out. We have a very high rate of student passes.
That's great. It sounds like an amazing program.
Thanks.